2024 Board of County Commission meeting here in Seminole County. It is approximately 9:30 and we are going to begin the meeting. I would ask that each and every one of you check your phones, silence them. If you have any other electronic devices, iPads or anything like that, if you'd be kind enough to silence those. We're going to get started with Chief Matt Kinley that's going to lead us in the pledge and invocation by Pastor Ron Williams. Chief?
Please join me. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Let us pray. Lord, we thank you that we have an opportunity today to live in America, the greatest nation ever on the earth, the land of the free because of the brave. And we thank you, Lord, not only that we live in America, but live in Seminole County. We really do believe it's the best county in the state of Florida. That's why we live here. And just personally, I thank you, Lord, that for 30 years as a pastor, that these people, the commissioners of this great county, have invited the faith-based community to come in here and invoke your blessings. And so we ask you, Lord, today to meet with us in a special way. I pray that you'd watch over the commissioners, help them to make wise choices for our community. And I feel for them, because no matter what they decide, there's going to be people that don't agree with them. And so, Lord, I just pray that you'd help them to have a backbone to just do what's right. And so I just pray you watch over them, watch over their families. I pray that you'd bring peace to our nation, help us to realize that there is more that unites us than divides us. And I pray that you'd protect all of the folks that are running for election in our country and watch over their families as well. We thank you, Lord, that we get an opportunity to recognize a veteran today and help all the veterans here today to know that we appreciate the sacrifices that they have made for us. And also that we're going to recognize some first responders, help them to know that we appreciate what they do for us, that while everybody else is running out of the burning building, they're running in. And so thank you for the first responders. Thank you for the law enforcement officers that bring peace to our community. I pray, Lord, that you'd put a hedge about our county, that evil would realize that it's not welcome here. And any bad actors would realize they're not welcome here. And you would help, Lord, us to continue to have a peaceful county here. I pray, Lord, for our military scattered around the world, that you'd protect them, help no one that has the flag of the United States on their shoulder today to die. And I pray, Lord, that you'd watch over those that are in the path of the hurricane, that they would get prepared and take this seriously and there'd be no loss of life. I pray, Lord, that you'd just deliver us from evil and keep us as the apple of your eye. Watch over our educators today and our students who will be going to the flagpole tomorrow, and they'll be offering their prayers for our nation and for their schools and their peers. And pray, Lord, that you'd watch over our kids and keep them safe as they go to school. So thank you, Lord, once again, that you've been invited here today. I pray that you'd show up in a special way. Bless these commissioners for what they do and the sacrifice they make to help our community be better. Which in Christ's name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you, Pastor. Thank you, Chief. Next up, we're going to invite Mr. Brian Applegate to the podium, the now retired Seminole County County Attorney. Mr. Applegate, welcome.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good morning, Commissioners. And I want to thank you for the opportunity today to say a few words about Paul Chipok. Like many people, I'm still trying to wrap my head around it. Paul loved serving Seminole County. He loved the challenge every day. Paul and I go back 35 to 40 years, and I can swear to you today that I never heard Paul Chipok say a bad word about anyone, ever. And on occasion, he had reason to. And I will tell you that it was fun working with Paul all these years. He would come into my office and start rattling off, well, here's the issue that you got to learn about. There's this property that has 2 easements on it, there's a canal, there's an improper legal description, there's a problem with the title, there's a right-of-way that runs through the center, we're having problems with FP&L. And he would look at me and see the glazed look on my face, like, and he would just say, let me draw you a picture, and he would. He was a great mentor to the younger attorneys in my office at that time. I would hear him talk to those attorneys about what they were dealing with. And I always knew that the conversation would end with a small chuckle, small laugh. He had a way of putting the younger attorneys at ease. And then I became the interim county manager, and Paul became the county attorney. So as I was rapidly losing what hair I had left, Paul decided to grow his. And on occasion, I would get a comment, you know, have you seen Paul's hair? And I go, well, obviously, yes. And I would chuckle. He said, I would say, Paul's saving some of it for me. So we always had a great time working together, and he loved working with the county staff, and I know they loved him. I could never put in words what a gentle soul he was. If I had a dime for every time we were working on an issue, and we would look at one another and say, one day we're going to be sitting at a bar smoking a cigar and drinking some water. Well, not water.
Yeah.
And laugh about this. Not to be. You know that I assigned Paul some of the most difficult issues we were all facing. Could be Sunrail, the Jetta Point releases that we had to deal with the state on. And I assigned Paul those for a couple of reasons. One was his intellect, obviously, but 2, his statewide reputation. Number 3, really the ability that he had of simplifying complicated issues. And as an attorney, that's a gift. And Paul was gifted in that respect. And I also knew that Paul commanded the respect of the lawyers in the other jurisdictions that we were working with, and that he was the perfect fit for that. And I know that you know that. And he made my life as a county attorney, a lot easier than it would have been. And then, as you know, when I dealt with my own issues, medical issues, Paul would be the first one every morning, would come into my office and say, what can I do today? What can I help you with today? Or if I was out, Paul would take over and I wouldn't have to worry about anything. But if I had a dime for every time I had a glazed look over my face when Paul was trying to explain a complicated land use issue, and he knew, I'm like, Paul, and he would say, pull out the pad, let's draw a picture. And I would say, oh, I get it now. So we were all blessed. You were blessed, the staff was blessed, and the citizens were blessed. And when I worked with Paul on the borough boundary issues, there were times Paul kept me from my head exploding. And I will never forget what he did for the county, for the citizens, for the younger attorneys in our office. and for me personally. He was his intellect, his gentle soul, his dry wit, and I'm going to talk more about that on Saturday, but I was blessed beyond measure. And I want to thank you for this time, but I assure you that Paul loved every single day he was here. In fact, I didn't know this until just the other day. Someone told me. Paul was offered 2 positions elsewhere. He wasn't looking, he was offered the positions that would have paid a lot more money. And he turned them down. He said he was happy where he was. And that tells me a lot about Paul and his loyalty. So thank you very much. And again, the only thing I can say is blessed beyond measure. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian, very much.
Good to see you, Brian.
Certainly will be missed. I think all of us enjoyed the time that we were able to spend with him, and, you know, my fondest memories were as a planning and zoning commissioner, him running the land use seminars for the new planning and zoning board members, and very, very bright man, very kind soul. So thank you very much. We sincerely appreciate it.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, if I may.
Yes, Commissioner Delory.
Brian, you obviously touched just a small sliver of what Paul Chippewa was to this county, and I get that. You can't repeat everything because we'd be here for a long period of time. We all got to know Paul in our own different ways, and he was truly a treasure, not just to the board, but the entire county. He was a great friend. I can remember many a times where, you know, he would come into the office and you started to notice that the hair was getting a little bit longer, and he just smiled about it as he would pull it back. It was colorful ties that he had. It was quite the comments. But one of the things I learned from Paul was not just his quiet demeanor, not just his passion for the county, but that there was always another day. And he loved music, and one of the groups that he really loved was the Grateful Dead. And Paul would quietly recite different verses periodically from different albums. And it was quite comical how he made such, that group not only made a big influence on him, but seeing him at the beach in New Smyrna, he lived life. And that's one of the biggest lessons that I took from Paul was you're not guaranteed tomorrow, but live for today because you're not sure what's going to happen tomorrow. So thank you for being here and talking to us about Paul.
Anyone else? Thank you all very much. Next, we're going to move into our proclamations. We're going to have 2 proclamations today, and we've also got a presentation on behalf of our fire division here in the county. I'm going to ask everyone to, once we're done with the proclamations, two proclamations presentation, then we'll all come down and get pictures. If you all just bear with us, we'll try to get through it as quick as we possibly can. First up is going to be Commissioner Delory will read a proclamation proclaiming Technical Sergeant Thomas Sterling, United States Air Force of Seminole County, September Veteran of the Month.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Proclamation of the Seminole County Board of County Commissioners recognizing United States Air Force Technician Sergeant Thomas Sterling for his outstanding service to the United States and Seminole County. Whereas the brave men and women of our Army, Navy, Marines, Air Force, Coast Guard, Space Force demonstrated a resolute spirit of unmatched selflessness, it reminds us that there are few things more Americans can give of ourselves to make a difference in the lives of others. And whereas throughout our country's history, generations of servicemen answer the call to leave their families, their jobs, and put their future and their lives in line to valiantly defend our nation. And whereas many service members have sacrificed ends in permanent injury or death, and yet the spirit remains in a continuous preservation of our freedom and promise of liberty. Whereas more than 30,000 living veterans in Seminole County who serves our nation in time of peace and war. Throughout their service, they've kept America strong. And whereas Techno Sergeant Thomas Sterling enlisted in the United States Air Force on January 5th, 1978, as an aircraft fuel technician and served honorably for over 16 years during Desert Storm and Desert Shield, as a Loadmaster Inspector and Stealth Fighter Program until retirement on January 31st, 1994. And whereas Techno Sergeant Thomas Sterling received an Air Force Commendation Medal with 2 devices, Small Arms Experts Marksmanship Ribbon, National Defense Service Medal, Air Force Training Ribbon, Air Force Longevity Service Award Ribbon with 3 D devices, Overseas Long Tour Ribbon, Air Force Good Conduct Medal with 4 devices, and Air Force Outstanding Unit Award with 4 devices. And whereas Techno Sergeant Thomas Sterling, upon retiring from the Air Force, moved to Chiliota and has lived there with his wife Peggy for 46 years. And whereas Techno Sergeant Thomas Sterling initially worked as a machinist building lasers and fighter simulators for University of Central Florida and the military, he then became a mechanic instructor, master technician for Vito High School training students in auto mechanics for the past 30 years. And whereas Techno Sergeant Thomas Sterling currently teaches after-school programs, automobile programs, and 2-week summer schools for special needs children, and has helped fund senior high school students' automobile projects, resulting in scholarships and awards for the Central Florida Auto Dealership Association, and has been a member of the Veterans of Foreign War in Chiliota for 20 years. And whereas Sergeant Thomas Sterling has brought great credit and distinction upon himself, the United States of America, the United States Air Force, and Seminole County, now therefore be proclaimed that we, the Board of County Commissioners of Seminole County, Florida, express our gratitude, admiration, and respect for Techno Sergeant Thomas Sterling for his outstanding service to the United States Air Force and the residents of Seminole County. Be it further proclaimed that this proclamation be presented to Techno Sergeant Thomas Sterling, along with our sincere congratulations and recognition as Seminole County Veteran of the Month, adopted this 24th day of September 2024.
Second.
Motion is second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, like sign. Hearing none. Carries unanimous. Sergeant, if you'd come up and have a few words, please come to the podium. Welcome and thank you, sir.
I would like to express my deepest gratitude for Seminole County officials and the community for this incredible honor. It is both humbling and uplifting to be recognized for my service, not only as a member of the United States Air Force, but also a teacher and a longtime resident of this wonderful county. Serving in the United States Air Force was one of the most transformative experiences of my life. It taught me value of discipline, sacrifice, teamwork, and dedication to the purpose greater than myself. For years in the Air Force, we were not just about defending the nation's values, but also about understanding the importance of community, leadership, and service. I carry these lessons with me every day, and I am proud to have served alongside so many brave men and women. As a teacher here in Seminole County, it has been a privilege to pass on some of these values to the next generation, working with young minds and being an equally rewarding journey filled with challenges, growth, and triumph. The opportunity to inspire and guide students extends to my passion of service. And every day I am reminded of how important our role is as educators in the shaping of the futures of our citizens. I want to thank each and every one of you for recognizing me today. It is not only a personal honor, but also a reminder of the importance of service, whether in the military or in the classroom. Thank you.
Thank you, Sergeant. And Sergeant, if you'll stick around, we're going to take a break after the presentation by our fire service, and we'll get some photographs with you and your family and so forth. So Please be patient with us. Next up, proclamation proclaiming October 2024 as Greenways and Trails Month in Seminole County, Florida. This will be entered in by Commissioner Andrea Herr. Commissioner?
Thank you, Chairman. Commissioners, I move the following proclamation of the Seminole County Board of County Commissioners proclaiming the month of October 2024 as Greenways and Trails Month in Seminole County, Florida. Whereas greenways, trails, and natural lands promote outdoor recreation, tourism, economic growth, and personal health and well-being, and whereas greenways and trails protect the environment by preserving open space, creating wildlife habitat, and establishing pedestrian corridors between populated areas and conservation lands. And whereas Seminole County Parks and Recreation maintain 51 miles of paved trails and 85 miles of unpaved trails and wilderness trails. And whereas Seminole County's greenways, trails, and natural lands provide clean water, air, and habitat on over 6,600 acres of environmentally significant lands. And whereas Seminole County's trails connect to neighboring communities and components of long-distance trail systems, including the Florida National Scenic Trail and the Florida Coast to Coast Trail. And whereas trails are an essential component of Seminole County's infrastructure, currently undergoing numerous improvements funded by the 1 cent infrastructure sales tax, commonly known as the penny sales tax. And whereas the state of Florida designates the month of October as Florida Greenways and Trails Month to highlight Florida's natural spaces and recreation trails. Now, therefore, be it proclaimed that we, the Board of County Commissioners of Seminole County, Florida, that we do hereby proclaim the month of October 2024 as Greenways and Trails Month in Seminole County, adopted this 24th day of September 2024.
Second.
Motion is second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, like sign. See none, carries unanimous. Mr. Durr, thank you very much for your hard work. Appreciate it.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes,
This
Commissioner.
morning, I don't know if Mr. Durr wants to address this or not now or maybe later, but this morning, the state of Florida put out a press release saying that we've added an additional 1,300 acres thanks to the Yarborough purchase by DEP for the Florida Forever program. So I don't know if the 6,600 includes the new 1,300. No. So 7,900 acres now that we have in Seminole County.
We might have to redo this document.
Hot off the presses.
Thank you, Commissioner. Okay, next up is our presentation recognition of Seminole County Fire Department's 50th anniversary. Chief Matt McKinley.
Good morning, Commission. For the record, Matt Kinley, Fire Chief, Seminole County Fire Department, and happy birthday, 50th birthday to Seminole County Fire Department. Before I say a few words on this momentous occasion, we do have a short video.
In 1974, Seminole County was tasked with the formation of a countywide fire department.
It went to the Board of County Commissioners, the first meeting in September. They voted to implement it effective October 1, and we had a mad dash.
We had 20 days, open 5 new fire stations, hire 56 people,
Buy trailers, buy trucks.
set up a countywide communication system.
We turned on the radio and started taking all the calls at midnight.
We succeeded because we didn't really know what we were up against. And sometimes that can be a gift.
Then called the Seminole County Department of Fire Protection, many of the origins of the department relied on the volunteer stations already in place.
We had bunker gear that we borrowed from volunteer fire departments. There was a hodgepodge of colors and, configurations.
The newly formed Seminole County Fire moving into the volunteer stations at Geneva, Chuliota, Goldenrod, Fern Park, and Forest City, with makeshift facilities used to complete the network of fire protection. And in the first year the department was founded, 1,900 calls.
For us, it was busy because it was the first time that there was a handle on how many actual calls the county was experiencing. When you had 28 different phone numbers and little volunteer fire departments, no one was collecting reports. So we didn't know.
These calls were ran in slime green colored trucks and with hand-drawn maps.
The guys, that we hired and were there were committed to making it work no matter what they had to do.
You're pulling together these ragtag people, unorthodox equipment, but that was, to quote a scene out of a movie, it's all part of the show. It was to show that we were doing things differently.
And how Seminole County Fire Department has grown since then. 20 stations, over 500 personnel, and so very many ways that SCFD stands out.
There's a lot of things we're proud of. There's a lot of things that we're known for. We are known as a very operationally sound, aggressive, interior firefighting department. Really embrace the EMS side of it. Our shot team, our power team, burn team, all of it. It's just we're always trying to pull in the new best practices or be the ones that are creating the best practices.
Those best practices earning Seminole County Fire Department a seat in the upper echelon. CAS and Center for Public Safety Excellence accredited, and ISO Class 1.
Class 1? Well, you don't get any better than that.
What did you start as?
9 and 10. And it doesn't go any higher.
From just getting started to the very best you can get in just 50 years. SCFD always with an eye on innovation while keeping the traditions of this homegrown department near and dear.
I think the best practice that anybody can do is try to build off of what has the foundation that's already been laid. Everybody talks about filling other people's shoes. I don't believe in filling other people's shoes. I believe in standing on their shoulders. So in just 50 years, we've achieved accreditations in CAS, CFAI, ISO 1, major milestones for any metro-sized fire department. None of this would have been possible without the vision of the board, both current and the past. Very significant events along the way. I'd also like to recognize Founding Fire Chief Gary Kaiser. Chief Kaiser is a true visionary in the fire service, and the rapid progress that the Seminole County Fire Department has taken is due to large part to the strong foundation that he and the founding members built. Every member, past and present, has contributed to raising this department higher and higher every year. I want to emphasize that this celebration is not just about the members of the fire department, but everyone all across all of the departments and divisions within the county. Our ability to provide the level of service that we do would not be possible without their collaboration, their assistance. We don't build the roads, we don't build the fire stations, we don't put the water supplies in, all very significant things for us to be able to do all the incredible things that we do. Thank you very much, and again, happy birthday. Very much appreciate the support. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. You know, I will tell you, I had the opportunity this year to spend a day over at the training center and put bunker gear on in the heat of the summer and walk into a smoke-filled. It's something everybody should experience, and once you do it, you will quickly realize our firefighters are priceless to this community and what they have to go through in those type things. And you have no idea how heavy that gear is and how hot that gear is. And then we're asking these men and women to run in and save lives. So thank you all very, very much. My big question is, there are a lot of you here today, who's running the fire department today? Thank you all for being here. Real quick, we're going to take a short break, get some photo ops with everybody, and then we'll come back with our investment advisors report.
Yeah, you live closer than anyone.
All right, we'll give everybody a chance to clear the chambers, and we'll move on to our consent agenda.
You want to do this?
Yeah. Not really based on what the Fed did, but that's another story. Do we have Mr. McIntyre queued up?
I think I am. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yeah. Oh, we can hear you now.
Great, fantastic. Well, good morning. As you guys, if you've been following the market, are aware, I can have whoever's controlling me turn to the first page. Major themes, the Fed did cut rates by 50 basis points. That was last week, and they gave us a new dot plot, which is their interest rate projection, and it indicates 2 additional cuts this year and 4 in 2025. The market expects more than that, so theoretically that makes the market expensive. Yields have continued to fall after that Fed move. The bond market is now pricing in 3 moves this year and another 5 in 2025. Obviously, there is so much in front of us with the elections. There's so much in front of us with the policies of both candidates. Both candidates have policies that are inflationary and also add to the national debt. So, although we certainly acknowledge that the market is usually correct over time, we also think that there's a lot in front of us. The 2-year Treasury note yield has fallen 150 basis points since the beginning of May, and every time the 2-year has fallen this far below the overnight funds rate, a recession has followed, according to the Wall Street Journal and a whole bunch of economists who dusted off and sort of revisited this idea. Honestly, it certainly doesn't appear as though a recession is around the corner. Inflation has definitely cooled. Job growth has slowed, but there is still job growth. Very little indicating recession is going to follow. In fact, third quarter GDP is tracking right now at very close to 3%, and obviously we're almost through with the third quarter. So second quarter growth was 3% as well. Obviously, when we're talking about a recession, it's 2 consecutive quarters with negative growth. So we're a long way from that, regardless of what the old models may say. And that makes it even more difficult, because one of the reasons the Fed would cut rates is to stimulate the economy. The economy seems to be doing pretty well. In fact, at this point in time, most folks are suggesting that the Fed has achieved the fabled soft landing, where inflation is coming to heel and the economy has not fallen into recession or really even slowed down. Of course, every week is a new week, every month is a new month, and everybody's watching real closely to see what the numbers are going to tell us going forward, including the Fed. I've got a few slides here. Next slide, please. I didn't include the inflation report because, frankly, the last time we got one, there was a little bit of it was mostly flat. It really didn't tell any particular story. When you look at the reports for Things like non-farm payroll growth, again, it's slowed, but it's still positive, so I don't think those graphs are very, very telling. Looking at the investment choices we have, and again, as we always do, going back to the last 3 meetings, you can see that especially the 1 year has fallen from 509 all the way down to 398. The 24-month Treasury has fallen from 471 to 364. It's actually a little bit lower today, although honestly there's so much volatility in the market. I wouldn't put a whole lot of stake in where it is at any given minute, but clearly things are lower. The pool rates are lower than they were. It's going to take a little while for them to fall and fully reflect the 50 basis point cut because they bought securities, and those securities are going to have to mature. They're all very short, so they will certainly mature in short order, and I think we'll see these pool rates that are closer to 5% over the course of the next couple weeks anyway. But again, these are the decisions we're making. We're stepping out of overnight rates. The portfolio is mostly invested, but there is a fair amount that is still overnight that's earning the higher yield. The question, as always, is do we want to step out and put more out in the longer maturities? This decision has gotten harder and harder. Fortunately, in the spring months, a lot of investing was done. Next slide, please. So upcoming maturities. There are a fair amount coming up within the next month or so, and then it sort of mitigates, slows down a little bit as we roll into November, December, and January, when you actually have positive funds flow. A number of these securities that are maturing are the short palm terms, which I would expect that we would roll over. They would wind up being at a lower rate, but it's relative to other security types, fairly positive. Recommended purchases. So I'm recommending that we take 30 million of these maturing funds, having checked with the comptroller's office and being comfortable with the cash flow, taking 3 blocks of 10 and going out into 2027 and targeting times when in 2027 you'll be expected to need funds. Now, I understand that we're walking away from a yield that is much higher. We're locking in. It yields out roughly 3 years now at 350-ish. And the concern is that by the time we get out 3 years from now, the Fed will have normalized interest rates and they'll be down around somewhere between 2.5% to 3%. So we'd like to be able to lock even more up than we have. Understanding that yields are lower, understanding that in theory, depending on how the election unfolds and how the economy unfolds, it could very well be that a couple of years from now, the overnight rate is still near 3.5% or 4%. But this is a hedge. This is recognizing that in 2021, in front of this group of county commissioners, we were discussing the idea that interest rates could potentially go negative in early 2021. Obviously, they did not, but that was a zero-rate environment. We're well above that now. We don't think that the economy is ever going to get to the point where the Fed is able to or willing or expects to cut below 1%, but we still want to take the bird in hand, lock in to the extent that we can out longer interest rates that provide some significant earnings, which these do. So 3 blocks of 10 out to June, August, and September of 2027, where at this point there are little or few securities maturing. And then one of those 10 million palm maturities we will roll out. The maximum you can roll out is 12 months, so out to 2025. My best guess is that will be around 4%, and with any luck that would wind up being a little bit higher. But that's what we're suggesting this time. This does leave quite a bit of money liquid. Next slide, please. Let me give you a quick shot at what the portfolio looks like. As of August 31st, the portfolio was yielding 493. Later on, as we moved into September and had a few securities mature and go into the pools, there was a period where the earnings were at or above 5%. That will fall. Moving out into September with the maturities that happen in September with these securities I'm proposing to purchase, doing the math on that, the maturity on the overall portfolio extends out to 300 days. The yield falls to 481. The mix of fixed rate maturities relative to floating goes from 81% fixed to 77% fixed, and there still is a pretty fair amount of liquid funds. So this leaves us nimble. It leaves us in a good position, I believe, going into the election, which again has a lot of uncertainty. There was a lot of securities that were purchased earlier in the year. We did wind up taking a bit of a break the last month to let things settle out. Things did not, the market actually fell further in terms of yield, but I think we sort of had to check and see what cash flows looked like, and that has been done, so we feel secure about that. So I wish I had better news in terms of yields being higher so that we could step out at higher levels, but I do feel like at this point the Fed is determined that they're going to lower rates from here. They've given us an indication that that's going to happen. My guess expectation is that the Fed winds up lowering a quarter in November, a quarter in December, a quarter in January, and a quarter in March. So I think that I think we'll get down below 4% on overnights faster than the Fed is expecting that we're going to. I think that as long as the runway is clear and they're able to lower rates and goose the economy a little bit and make lending easier for homeowners and for people who have debt, I think that they're going to take that opportunity to do it. So stepping back up here to the recommendations on the previous slide,
Okay.
I think I need to get approval from you
Any
folks.
inquiries? Commissioner Constantine.
Thank you. Scott, thank you very much. But I did want to make you aware of a couple of things that just happened at the Florida Association of Counties meeting in Pensacola. First of all, last month, and I don't know if you knew this, but last month I was appointed to the board of Florida Trust. And at the luncheon on Thursday at the Florida Association of Counties in Pensacola, Chairman Childers, the clerk of Escambia County, announced a 7% yield for 12 months. Now, that sounds too good to be true. I hope she was correct, but I would ask you to please check on that.
Who's it with, Commissioner?
For Florida Trust. 7% yield for a 12-month period. She announced that at the luncheon on Thursday. So I would ask you to please take a look at that immediately, just to see just what kind of conditions there might be on that, or if we can qualify for that, because personally, I would take that in a heartbeat.
I think it would.
I will tell you that I would be very interested in what it is they're invested in, but this is such an efficient market. I've got screens in front of me literally every day, and we're combing the market for all of our clients nationwide, and 7% in a rate environment where you should be getting 4 raises red flags.
I agree with you. I agree.
Suspect at best.
Suspect at best.
Yeah, I agree with you, but I'm just telling you what I heard, and I asked it again, and that was the answer I received. So I would just anything that looks too good to be true probably is, but it would be worth our while to at least investigate.
Okay. Anyone else?
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion.
Please.
I'd like to make a motion to implement the recommendation of our finance advisor based on the report submitted here today, and recommend the clerk implement said board's recommendation as presented.
Motion is second. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed, like sign. Carries unanimous. Thank you, Mr. McIntyre. We sincerely appreciate you being here remotely today.
Thank you all. We appreciate it as well, and have a good rest of the day and week.
You as well. And by the way, I would have won the bet with Mr. McIntyre when we were talking on the meeting that I bet they would go 50 basis
Half a
points.
point, yeah.
Instead of 25. Next, we're going to move to our consent agenda. If anyone is here from the public and wishes to speak on any of the consent agenda items, Please find the forms out in the lobby. Make sure you fill out the specific item and number it in the numbered column. And if you'll hand it to the clerk, Dominique, right here at the front with her hand up, so that we are prepared to allow you to speak on any of these agenda items that you desire to do so. With that said, I'm going to move to the county attorney, Ms. Kate Latour, for an overview of public participation.
Thank you, Chairman. Good morning, everyone. Florida law provides that members of the public shall be given a reasonable opportunity to be heard on propositions before the Board of County Commissioners, except when the board is acting on emergency or ministerial matters or conducting a meeting exempt from the requirements of the Sunshine Law. Individuals shall be permitted 3 minutes each for public comment or 6 minutes when the individual is an official representative of a formal association or group. The chairman may modify the maximum time for public comment at his sole discretion when appropriate. Public comments on quasi-judicial or other public hearing items will occur during the board's consideration of those items this afternoon. Public comments on pending procurement matters or on non-agenda items shall not be permitted at this time. Members of the public desiring to make comment must fill out a speaker form and present the form to staff. Forms are available in the lobby. Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much. Next item will be for the county manager. Do you have any updates, deletions, additions, walk-ons?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners. Yes, just two changes to the consent agenda. I'd like to pull item number 14. I'll be bringing that back to the board, as well as item 16. On 16, we have not received the agreement from the state, so as soon as we receive that, we'll bring that back.
Okay, item 14 and 16 being pulled by the county manager. Any commissioner desire to pull any of the other items? Seeing none, we will go to public input. Do we have any speakers here on any of the agenda items on the consent?
Yes, sir.
Okay. If we would have that individual's name and the item number you desire to speak on.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Caitlin Neal, and I'm a new...
We'll need your address for the record, please.
I am a new resident of Seminole County at 1113 Wading Waters Circle in Winter Park. I am a homeschool mother of 3, and I brought my children here today to experience government and in this form, and I thought the best thing for them would be to witness me speaking on the proposed water increase. My husband and I work very hard to provide incredible opportunities for our children. Like many people in my neighborhood, we are constantly budgeting and rearranging our budget, and to have opened my water bill and find that we have this potential increase, it's like another thing knocking us back, another thing. We've eliminated the junk food, we've eliminated the popsicles from our grocery trips, we've eliminated all the things that we can from our budget at this time, and at some point the rubber's going to meet the road, and I don't know what that would look like for my family. And so I know that as a homeschool mom, I have a lot more freedoms, and I'm able to actually show up here today, unlike a lot of my counterparts. And so I unofficially am speaking for my entire neighborhood and asking that we really look deeper and shy away from this increase. All the other utilities have gone up in so many other areas, or at least delay the increase until we know the outcome of the election and have more foresight, more clear foresight into what the economy might look like in the next year or two. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for hearing what I have to say. Do you have any questions for me?
No, ma'am.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. If we would have asked staff to get with this resident, help them understand how the rates are set, the bond covenants, so on and so forth, if we could do that, Mr. County Manager?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners, and that's exactly what I was going to suggest. So I'll have Mr. Johnny Edwards over here. He'll come and meet with you and give you his contact information, and it's all part of a plan to keep our system up and running. So, Mr. Edwards, if you mind.
Great, thank you very much.
Mr. Chairman.
Commissioner Lockhart.
I appreciate you wanting to take the conversation offline for the purposes of probably efficiency, but I think it's important that others who might be watching the meeting understand that this was a long-range plan that was studied by people outside of our organization that brought us this plan for the purposes of making sure that the system was maintained and that the right amount of capital investment was made. There are utilities in our county who continue to do exactly what was mentioned, and that was delay the increases that were necessary, and they are in dire straits right now, facing, I want to say billion with a B, billions of dollars of infrastructure improvements needed because they continue to delay the necessary improvements and repairs that were needed, and we don't want to be in that situation. This decision has nothing to do with the politics of the day, locally or the nation. It has to do with running a system and making sure that our citizens have the best quality water and the best quality system so that it doesn't fall into disrepair. And I feel exactly where you're coming from, and I can relate to your situation entirely. I do hope our staff will be able to take the time to answer specific questions, but for anyone else listening, I just wanted to explain that this was not something we did overnight. It's a long-range plan. It was looked at very, very closely by our board, and sometimes you have to make those tough decisions.
Well, to that point, if we're going to talk about it, let's just go ahead and talk about it. You could be in my district. I just got a 12% increase to my water bill from the city, which is due to the inability to properly fund increases in infrastructure to maintain a water system for the last arguably 25 years, that is now faced with probably spending somewhere close to $250 million, and we're told we're going to see additional rate increases of 3% for the next 3 years. It costs money to run these plants, maintain these plants, run the infrastructure, and that, of course, falls on the ratepayers. It's incumbent upon us not to put the citizens in a situation where they are going to be faced with a 15% one-year increase, and that's why these things are typically done in a step process, using consultants who are experts to analyze our infrastructure, do a long-range master plan on what things look like 10, 20, 30 years down the road, so we're not leaving it for the next generation to sit here and go, yeah, we're real sorry that we didn't do anything over the past 20 years. You guys now have to go take a loan out on your home to actually get water. So it's a good business model. It's good business practice to make sure that you are funding the infrastructure for the ratepayers appropriately in a timely fashion, so it doesn't fall, on the backs of all the ratepayers all at one big fall swoop. And not to mention, the cost to run plants, labor, materials, just like our budgets at our homes, everything has gone up. Fuel, groceries, et cetera, so does the government's cost right along with it, with the contractors and all those things that go along with it. Commissioner Constantine.
And with that, the last thing is, it is an enterprise fund, which means it is completely separate from all other funds of our budget. It pays and is on its own to pay for itself. And with that, I would just move the approval of the constitutional officers' consent agenda 5 and 6, and the county manager's consent agenda of 7 through 26, with the exception of 14 and 16.
Second.
And motion is second. Any further discussion? I think there was a question or statement by Commissioner Hurd.
Yeah,
We can talk about the.
I appreciate you declaring the conversation over, but I would just like to put the emphasis at the front of all of that conversation about water is that the primary focus is around safety. and that safety for the future generations that you very wisely brought to watch you testify today on their behalf, because that's what we're doing. But the reality of what we've seen around the country and what we've seen even around the state is that those organizations that don't put safety first with regard to water end up having citizens that have to pay more in the interim before the large upgrade is done, when things have degraded to that point. We don't want to be in that position, so.
Amen. All right, we got a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, like sign. Seeing none, carries unanimous. Very good. Next item up is our work session. This is item 27, Code Enforcement Update. Mr. Mike Rhodes will be presenting this. And if there is anyone here to speak on this work session, please fill out a form in the lobby, bring it up to Dominique. In the interest of time, if you don't have a sheet turned in, we're going to keep on moving. So if you want to speak, please get a form filled out now. Thank you. Mr. Rhodes, welcome.
Mr. Chairman and members, thank you all very much for the opportunity to work for you here in Seminole County. I've always regarded Seminole County as one of the best-run local governments in the state of Florida. I spent 34 years working for the city of Orlando and always looked north for you all to provide guidance on a lot of things, and it's a pleasure for me to have this opportunity. You brought me in to talk and work with you on code enforcement and address some issues of concern. Very quickly, just want to hit on a few high points. Obviously, there's some history here in Seminole County to talk about. We want to talk a little bit about your code enforcement process specifically. Want to talk to you about a few quick data points and then talk with you about the recommendations that I have to share with you today. There was a little bit of data collection and analysis, not a lot. In truth, because a lot of your system's not centralized, there's not a lot of data to look at. And we'll look at some in a little bit. I don't want to harp on it, but I do want to thank the folks who worked with me to help me at least collect what we do have. Spent a lot of time interviewing staff, interviewing you all, interviewing your aides. Really appreciate the time and energy you all are willing to put into it. We also did some peer comparisons, and I had the opportunity to do ride-alongs with all your staff. Everybody was really terrific and supportive of the effort, and I want to thank them all again. Why code enforcement? You know, code enforcement's always been kind of the black sheep in local government. Again, I spent 20-plus years running code enforcement in Orlando, so I'm familiar with the role. But if you don't believe that what you're doing is protecting public health, safety, and welfare when you do this, you're not doing it right. And at the core of everything we do in code enforcement, whether it's minimum standards code, land development codes, property maintenance codes, it's all about protecting the public's health, safety, and welfare. It's also a little bit about, or a lot about, sustaining your property values. And it's, you've got a second hearing today on your budget. You're looking at those bottom lines every single day. And, you know, the good news about life here in Florida is that property values by and large are going up. But we've had times when they haven't gone up. And if you don't understand that code enforcement plays a role in maintaining property values and improving property values, again, you don't understand code enforcement. It's also important in maintaining a favorable climate for development and redevelopment activity. If your community looks good, people want to be here. People want to live here. People want to develop here. People want to find a way to invest here. And that's all part of what we do in code enforcement. Some quick history on code enforcement in Florida and in Seminole County, just for folks who aren't familiar. In 1982, the state created code enforcement boards and the code enforcement process. Prior to that, everything got done through the county court system. County court systems were getting clogged up. Crime was a much bigger problem then, not unlike now. And so the state of Florida decided to put code enforcement into a civil process that was part of the county code enforcement process for boards, later on for magistrates. We'll talk about that. Seminole County adopted its first ordinance pursuant to that statute in 1983. It adopted a minimum standards code in 1992. In 2003, you adopted your first MOU, which delegated responsibility for code enforcement over to the sheriff's office. In 2009, you amended that memorandum of understanding to begin to define some silos and define areas of responsibility within code enforcement. Again, in part because there was just some need for clarification between what the sheriff's office and other staff were going to be doing with the county. And again, we'll talk about some of those different roles in a moment. In 2012, you added special magistrates. Part of the reason why the county added special magistrates, and a lot of counties and cities did this across the state, was because finding volunteers to serve on code enforcement boards was difficult. And it's still difficult sometimes. And so you engage a magistrate, their attorneys who come in on a monthly basis. You pay them to handle these cases on a monthly basis now here in Seminole. And again, it's not unlike it's done across the state. 2019 was the last time you all visited this issue, and code enforcement generally in a very specific way. And at that time, you all adopted a lien amnesty program. The lien amnesty program went for 3 years, netted you about $70,000 in additional fine collections. And that's kind of the last time you all took a long look at code enforcement. Let's talk a little bit about Chapter 162 of the Florida statutes. Chapter 162 outlines kind of the process generally across the state of Florida. It sets up boards and magistrates. It sets up the fines and the liens that the cities and counties can impose. It actually establishes criteria for emergency action, which some jurisdictions use and some do not. More famously here recently, the state statute was amended to address anonymous complaints. And as most of you know, in 2021, bill passed the Florida legislature that essentially said that you can't leave a code enforcement officer cannot initiate a code enforcement case by virtue of an anonymous complaint. Now, there are actually two parts to that statutory change, and it's important to note that a lot of folks in local government focused on the first part without focusing on the second part. And the second part I've got underlined for your convenience here. And note that it says this paragraph does not apply if the code inspector has reason to believe that the violation presents an imminent threat to public health, safety, or welfare, or imminent destruction of habitat or sensitive resources. A lot of local governments have paid attention to the first part without paying attention to the second part. And in truth, in order to look at the second part, you actually have to go out and look at a violation, or at least look at an alleged violation. And again, it's based upon the information you have. There's some discretion that's certainly part of that process for the code enforcement inspector, but it's an important part of the statute that we need to remember here. Chapter 162 also establishes the fines and liens that can be imposed. Seminole County could probably do a little bit of work on that front, and we'll talk about that a little bit later too. But as you all know, these are the teeth that were given in code enforcement in the state of Florida. We impose fines, we impose liens against property, and those fines continue until properties are brought into compliance. Sometimes that's pretty quick, sometimes it's not. The good news is that if it's not quick, that lien doesn't just go away. And code enforcement liens, unlike a lot of other judgments, are out there for 20 years. And while you could argue, and I could certainly understand why people might say, well, you know, the fines don't do enough, it doesn't serve as enough of an inducement. First, it's what the legislature's given us. But those liens are good for 20 years. And I don't know too many people who over a 20-year time frame haven't had to buy or sell or refinance their property in some way, shape, or form. Certainly, right now as interest rates come down, there might be, if we get a few more quarter points, some inducement for people to want to refinance. And if you've got code enforcement fines and liens out there, you can't refinance without addressing your code violations and your code liens. I want to talk a little bit about the code enforcement process specifically here in Seminole County. And I know I've had an opportunity to go over this with most of you, so I don't want to belabor the point. But again, that top tier of boxes represents the time that, the time from when a complaint comes in until the time that it gets ready to get sent to the code enforcement board or the magistrate for a hearing. And that time frame, under the best circumstances for the time the complaint comes in until the time it goes to a hearing, is probably 90 to 120 days. And in many cases, in fact, most cases here in Seminole County, it's more than 120 days. And that's for a variety of different reasons. Some of that's discretion of the officer. Some of that's their consideration for the circumstances that are presented to them by the property owners, whether it's illness or financial hardships or what have you. But that process itself takes time. When that time is up and the officers decide to refer cases before the code enforcement board, in Seminole County, all of those cases are handed off to a clerk, and the clerk is then responsible for sending out all the legal notices associated with those cases. And depending upon when those cases are handed off to the clerk, that could take another 30 to 60 days. Once those notices are served against the property owners involved, a hearing can occur. The hearing times vary depending upon whether it's the magistrate or the code enforcement board, but the timeframes that the board or the magistrate may give them are also going to vary when it comes to adjudicating the cases. So they hear the evidence, testimony. It's just like court. I know a number of you have been to those hearings and seen them for yourselves, so you understand what it's like. You talk about the rubber meeting the road. That's real life. That's real local government stuff. And your board and your magistrate, by and large, make decisions based on the evidence and testimony that's presented, and by and large, make decisions that I think reflect, for the most part, what's right to give to a property owner in terms of compliance. And sometimes that could be 30 days, sometimes that could be 60 days, sometimes that could be 180 days. It all depends upon what happens here in these chambers with the board and with that magistrate. So again, you add that to the time frame that's already passed for all the rest of the stuff, and you're getting on into many months into the process. Seminole County is unique because you all have, by ordinance, a lien hearing. And what that essentially means is that when the property owner is found in noncompliance with the board or the magistrate's order, you have a second hearing for that property owner. That second hearing is a lien hearing, and at that hearing, the property owner, again, is sent legal notices, advised of their opportunity to come here and speak and represent their circumstances. I can tell you that in most cases, when they come in and do that, the board and or the magistrate will afford them more time if they've got a good story to tell. And it's understandable, but again, it's a little unusual that in Seminole County you all do that. A lot of other counties, the order is the order, and that's that. Conducting that lien hearing oftentimes results in an extension of time. And so again, a lien hearing occurs, the board or the magistrate may afford the property owner additional time if they show up, if they've got a story to tell. And again, it's understandable, but again, you're adding time to the process. Only after all that time has expired and the board or the magistrate decide not to extend the time frames, only then do they order liens to be filed. And as you all know, probably know, it's only when your lien's filed that you've really kind of perfected your interest in the property and secured your standing with regards to any kind of future buying, selling, or refinancing or anything else. Let's talk a little bit about code enforcement organization here in Seminole County. You probably know that code enforcement's decentralized within the Board of County Commissioners over 4 different departments. You also have code enforcement staff, again, by virtue of that memorandum of understanding, who are assigned to the Sheriff's Office. There are 6 FTEs that you originally funded at the Sheriff's Office back in 2003, and you currently have 6 folks assigned there now. You also have code enforcement officers designated in the tax collector's office, and I believe that they're primarily involved in going after folks for delinquent business tax receipts and things like that. You also have across the county, as part of your administrative code, 21 different positions in different departments, those 4 different departments that we talked about, but 21 different positions defined with code enforcement responsibilities. Only 2 of those positions have code enforcement responsibilities as 100% of their jobs, and those are the Sheriff's Office staff and 2 folks who work in the building division prosecuting permitting cases. Chapter 53 sets up your code enforcement process. It actually implements Chapter 162 of the Florida statutes. We've talked a little bit about that as we've gone through our conversations with you. Seminole County, again, is unique in that it has a guide for penalty recommendations. And a guide for penalty recommendations as a code standard is a little bit difficult to manage. Because as a guide, it's not, at least in theory, not law. However, when you have penalties that are set forth as recommendations that are in code, it's very difficult for your staff or for your magistrate or for your board to step away from those standards. And I'm sure that there was a time and a place for that, particularly in the early days of code enforcement back in the 90s. And the 80s even, but that's probably something that is worth a conversation about revisiting. Chapter 53 also sets up your code citation program. Your code citation program is very much like issuing somebody a traffic ticket for a code violation. And code citations are really terrific for addressing violations associated with people as opposed to property. You have it in your code, it's not used, except by animal services, and it seems that only animal services has used it somewhat consistently over the years. By and large, it's not used really by anybody else within Seminole County government. Chapter 95 sets forth your health and sanitation requirements in Seminole County, and it has become the de facto minimum standards code. That's something that I'm going to encourage you to revisit as we get down the road here. But you can see detailed there all the things that constitute public nuisances here in Seminole County. And what you find is that and again, this is predominantly the sheriff's staff, try to fit the various conditions that they find around the county into these different definitions of nuisances. And they do a pretty good job of that, but this is not a minimum standards code. These are the things, the nuisance things, that at some point you should be thinking about abating and trying to address immediately, rather than addressing through a process that takes months, as it does now. And all these things are no question nuisances. But there are other ways to deal with it that are preferable if you work to adopt a proper property maintenance code. Chapter 40 is what the building division uses, and those 2 building inspectors use to address folks who are doing work without permits or doing work outside the scope of permits. Chapter 40 has as you all know, also has all the building trades that are associated with it, and the building trades obviously are adopted on 3-year cycles or updated on 3-year cycles, unlike a lot of your other code standards. The Land Development Code, I previously referred to this in some of my conversations with you as code enforcement potpourri. There's a lot of time and energy you all put into developing your land development code regulations, your master plan requirements for large master plan communities and larger developments. And this is an excerpt from your land development code, kind of in what I'd call the preamble. But when you think about the time and energy you all put, your planning staff puts into coming up with a package of recommendations for you all to approve, you should look equally at how that's enforced. And at the moment, you have a position, you actually have a couple of positions in the planning department who have a percentage of their time that might be allocated to enforcement activity, but nobody's looking at that, at making sure that these things happen 100% of the time. And that's a concern I think you should all have, given the time that you put into trying to make sure that it's developed the right way. Let's talk for a few minutes about the Code Enforcement Board and Special Magistrate. The Code Enforcement Board are volunteers, as you all know. You all go through and appoint these folks. They're handling predominantly nuisance cases brought by the Sheriff's Office. The magistrate is appointed annually by the County Commission, and she handles primarily permitting cases, although there are some other cases involving land development code violations, such as stormwater cases like were heard last week. And those are prosecuted most of the time by the building division, but also in some instances by your planning staff, some folks in emergency, I'm going to call it emergency services. That may not be the proper nomenclature, but as it relates to addressing and some other activities. I mentioned before that there's no centralized data collection going on in code enforcement. You've got code enforcement in a lot of different places in county government, as we already talked about. So coming up with statistics that I could share with you have been rather difficult. I'll tell you the Sheriff's Department has been the best source of information. I appreciate, again, their help in putting some of this information together. But because you don't have great data, you also don't have great performance measurement that you all can look to as a way of gauging their overall performance and service to the community. And that's something, again, that I think you all want to look at changing. Let's talk about some of the data points, and this is a biggie. So this is new code enforcement cases that are coming through. This is only information from the Sheriff's Office because that's the only place where I can get data. And what you'll note here, and I apologize if it's a little difficult for folks in the back to read, what you'll note here is that the high point for new code enforcement cases was in 2018, where you had 2,198 cases. Since 2018, there's been a pretty significant drop in the number of code enforcement cases, almost 60% since 2018 until the end of last year. Some of that, obviously, you can attribute to the COVID pandemic, although a lot of jurisdictions actually saw some increases because more people were home and staring at their neighbors' nasty backyards and pools and wondering why things weren't better. In Seminole County, that was not the case. And so, again, we see this drop, and I'll also point you to 2021 and 2022. 2021, July 2021 was when the state statute went into effect with regards to people providing their names and addresses in order to leave a complaint. And so from 2021 to 2022, you saw a drop of 20%. So significant drop off in the activity level overall. It's also reflected to some extent in the number of code enforcement cases you see. Code enforcement cases countywide, and again, apologies to folks in the back, but in July of 2024, between the magistrate and the board, you heard a grand total of 16 new code enforcement cases. It's not a lot. I'd really expect something on the order of double for a community this size. And the same could be said for the complaints too, and we'll talk about some of the reasons why here in a moment. Lien filings, remember, are how we perfect our interest in properties that are in violation of city code. That seems to be getting a little bit better. A lot of that I'd attribute to, again, some consistency on the staffing side for code enforcement. So we're seeing those numbers go up, but when it comes to protecting the county's interests and making sure that you're holding violators accountable, you do that through filing liens. And in July, I believe the last month I had there was July, you had 11 liens filed countywide. I want to talk a little bit about density here in Seminole County. You know, density is why we have all these code standards. And a lot of people are going to wonder why we have all these code standards and not fully appreciate it. But this number is intended to help you hopefully understand a little bit more. And you know, Seminole County is a densely populated county. It's the 4th most densely populated county in the state, and these are 2021 census derived numbers anyway. And you can see Seminole, again, is 4th most densely populated county in the state of Florida. When you take out the rural protection area, or the rural boundary area, it's 81 square miles, give or take. It bumps Seminole County up to the 2nd most densely populated county in the state of Florida, behind Pinellas County. Pinellas County's got 16 folks involved in code enforcement countywide, a lot of condominiums, a lot of different issues that you have here in Seminole County. In fact, as we were going through these briefings, I have to thank Commissioner Delary for pointing out the fact that I did not include the Wekiva protection area when I did this analysis. And so when you take the Wekiva protection area out, it knocks that density number up even higher. I don't think we passed Pinellas County quite yet, but when you think about staffing and organization issues going forward, I would encourage you to maintain at least an eye on this density number, because the more your community grows, the more densely populated you become, the more you're going to need to pay attention to these code enforcement standards and just make sure that they're properly enforced for a lot of different reasons that we've talked about, and we can talk about some more if you like. International Property Maintenance Code is an international code standard. It is it's developed by the International Code Council. It's one of those things that complements your building and trades codes. It integrates with your building and trades codes. And I've got a list here of communities just here in Central Florida that have adopted the IPMC as their minimum standards code. I'd encourage you to do that here in Seminole County. It's been a long time since you adopted your first property maintenance standard back in 1992. The building trades have evolved, our standards have evolved as a community, and these minimum property maintenance standards go a long way towards addressing not just residential property, but commercial property, vacant property, and property maintenance standards in general that, again, are intended to help preserve public health, safety, and welfare and maintain our property values. Let's go ahead and get into recommendations. The first one you've already checked off, because at your last, or at least the August 27th meeting of the Board of County Commissioners, you all selected a new software vendor to provide you with new land development and permitting software, and included in that was also code enforcement software. And that code enforcement software, if properly designed and properly implemented, should give you a public-facing portal to manage complaints. It should provide you with end-to-end tracking that will provide you all with an understanding of where things are in the process. It'll also allow you potentially to publish that information and provide some transparency for your residents that I think is important. There are a number of code revisions I've touched on as we've gone along, but I want to just highlight them here. Again, please adopt the International Property Maintenance Code. By adopting the IPMC or something like it, you get to deal with problems before they become nuisances, and that's really critical. You've got housing stock that you need to preserve. You've got property values that you need to preserve, and adopting a minimum standards code like this is going to allow you to better do that. I think it's important to take a long look at revising Chapter 53 for fine and lien reconsiderations. This board takes up a lot of time and energy on code enforcement matters, and it's one of those things that can be properly delegated to the code enforcement board and the magistrate. You all can provide some guardrails for that if you feel like it's appropriate, but these are the folks who are hearing all the evidence and dealing with these cases from the beginning until the end, and as it is, I think they're going to be better situated in a lot of cases to consider whether or not to reduce fines or rescind fines or liens. I also think it's important that the county consider updating its fine provisions. The state statute was amended many years ago to provide for fines up to $1,000 a day, and for counties over 50,000 in population. And obviously, Seminole County is a long way past that. The statute allows for you to impose fines of up to $1,000 a day, and I'm not suggesting for 1 second that it's appropriate in every case to do it, but every now and then, you want to be able to do that. You need to be able to send that message, and you need to make sure that the stakes are as high as possible. The statute allows you to impose fines of up to $1,000 a day, and I think you need to give your board and your magistrate and your code enforcement staff the opportunity where it's appropriate to be able to impose those kind of fines. There are also those recommendations that we talked about a little bit in Chapter 53 that I really think should be pulled out. And again, leave that discretion to your board and to your magistrate. And then there's some policy updates that will need to go along with all those things. I want to talk again, the software that you've purchased is going to do a lot to allow you to track cases from beginning to end, but unless you provide people with access to it easily, in the form of where this portal is placed on your website, is absolutely critical. Right now, some of you know that if you want to get a complaint logged in the system, you wind up eventually on the sheriff's website, and I'm told that they're looking to make some updates there. And I think that's going to be important for them. But I can tell you that for the public, if it takes more than 3 or 4 clicks to get a complaint into your system, they're just not going to do it. And so the result is going to be they're going to continue to call you and your aides, which is a lot of what's happening right now. Providing that public-facing portal, again, can provide transparency into the process that really doesn't exist right now, and will go a long way towards just building trust with the residents who are logging the complaints, and also giving them an opportunity to maybe deal directly with the code enforcement staff dealing with the case. I think it's important to consider consolidating the code enforcement function under a single organization reporting to the board. Right now, again, it's in 4 different departments. It's at the sheriff's office, it's at the tax collector's office. You need to consolidate at least as much of this as you possibly can into a single organization that's responsible for enforcing all your county codes, so that you as commissioners and the public don't have to figure out which one of those different departments is the appropriate department to have to address their complaint to. Put it into one portal, have it go to one agency, have that one agency deal with all those violations. And that one agency and those people can deal with minimum standards codes, zoning codes, and all that good stuff. It's important to, at the same time, overhaul that internal case management process to begin shaving time off where it's possible. Revise the magistrate procedures, possibly get rid of that lien hearing and consolidate that into a single hearing. And then also, I would encourage you to take a look at revising your abatement process. Right now, all the abatements are coming to you all. They could be going to your board or your magistrate. And I also think it's important to take a look at the funding that you provide for that right now. We don't want to click now. Now we want to click. Thank you. So just kind of provide you with three options for discussion's sake. Obviously, the first one is to continue on with the way things are. That's why I'm here. The second is to continue with the current organizational structure, but to amend the MOU with the Sheriff's Office and hopefully execute a lot of those code changes that we talked about. If you don't execute the code changes, anything else you do is going to be somewhat empty. So I think that at a minimum, those code changes need to be made. And then the third option, obviously, is to reorganize the structure to centralize responsibility under one agency, give you all one person to call, one agency to go to, one throat to choke if things aren't right. So that, and again, that's not just for you all, but that's for your constituents as well. And then again, make those code changes. Obviously, there are budget and staffing considerations in doing that, and organizational placement considerations there. So with that, I'll go ahead and wrap and see what questions you might have.
Great. Any questions
of me.
for Mr. Rhodes? Commissioner Herr.
I don't have any questions, but I think the work that you've done is really remarkable and provides a very good lens to what I've been feeling for 4 years. So the good news is to the team that's worked in the District 5 office and myself, it's not us.
At least not all the time.
Not all the time, no, that's probably 50-50. Just some general comments. First of all, I do agree with all of your recommendations. I land squarely on number 3, that I think it's time that we reorganize. The 80s was a wonderful decade. I thoroughly enjoyed myself during the 80s, but we don't live there anymore, and we probably need to come into the current time. Consolidating the time for all of this to happen is important. I am a huge supporter of getting rid of that lien hearing. It just slows the whole process down and puts us in jeopardy. The guide needs to be replaced with an actual enforceable document, which I think the Sheriff's Office has been asking for a very long time. We do need to add the minimum standards code. I personally, and I don't think this was in there, would like us to consider or at least research the opportunity of moving entirely away from a volunteer board into a situation where it's just consistently run by people that are in the role to make those decisions, whether that's a magistrate or some other form. I think the community deserves consistency with regard to how we do this. I'm also in favor of moving as much of it as we can off of this board. This is a governing board, not a managing board, and we are in the business of managing when we're making these decisions, with often very little information, given that it's a 20-year history, and we require staff to give it to us in such a condensed format to meet the meeting time. It's not optimal, so I would also do that. I think the portal is critical, but I would also add to your list, I did not see that in there, that use of the portal by the entire team, once this is all reconfigured, including our offices, is critical. So the portal shouldn't just be for citizens. There needs to be a staff component to make sure that we're not creating the next data void. No Excel spreadsheets on the side of somebody's desk when we have a portal that can track our issues as well. The 21 positions touching this just is mind-boggling to me. I do agree that LDC enforcement, and we've heard that in this chambers time and time again from citizens that struggle with the new development and what's happening and how we enforce that. We have to get in front of that. And then the last thing is and you did mention this, but I didn't see it in writing, and that is that the portal accessibility to the public, nothing can be 3 clicks away for the public. And once it's in there, it should be automatically populating dashboards. All set then.
Knew that was coming.
Mr. Delory.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First of all, Mike, thank you. Thank you for your hard work. I not only enjoyed the update in my office, but hearing from other people about how you went out there and did a lot of the field work yourself is very commendable. Also want to thank the sheriff for all the hard work, not just the sheriff's department's done, but your officers. It's looking at this, we may not have given you all the proper tools, listening to our consultant, that I'm glad that we're looking at this from a new lens perspective. I think it's important that we take all your recommendations. I think we need to move forward, but also asking our staff for a timeline of how this is actually going to be implemented and what's the actual cost of it. You did mention the new software that we purchased. I know that that software is not going to be implemented immediately because there's going to be some onboarding of that software, as well as the new portal, as well as the new code updates, as well as organizing it. And so I'd like to understand what the whole timeline is going to be, because it won't happen within 30 days, obviously.
Absolutely.
Even though we want it to happen within 30 days. And I know that our attorney's office could make that happen, but I know that's a heavy lift for anyone to do. But I want to thank you, and also want to thank the Sheriff's Department, all your hard work and continued hard work, because of the frustration of some of the things that was pointed out here today. And I know that if we look at this holistically, we can achieve just about anything. So thank you.
Mr. Lockhart.
Echo the great thanks. Really important to have a fresh set of eyes on something that has just become a course of doing business around here for so many years, so thank you. Recognizing that the sheriff is here, if he has input, I would love to hear from him on his thoughts. Would also like any other members of the public that are here to share their thoughts. And I kind of feel bad giving my thoughts before they give their thoughts, because it makes it sound like I already made my mind up. But I will say that I will echo everything that was said with a question about the piece.
Sheriff, if you want to make yourself comfortable, we'll get you here.
Yeah, just give me 1 second on this one question about us annually appointing the special magistrate. I do not recall us ever doing that.
The contract.
There's a contract, and I, off the top of my head, do not know what the term is, but since I've been here in the last year, I don't recall that we appointed the magistrate within the year.
I think that maybe that's something that wound up just being done in the county attorney's office on autopilot, perhaps. But if it says in our code that it's supposed to come to the board, we probably ought to do that or take it out of the code, whichever the board, whichever way we lean. I will also say that, well, I'll wait and hear what comments want to be made by others who are here.
Commissioner Constant, you have anything to say? Okay.
I do, but I will hold it until.
Sure. I want to go to the public. Before we all get engaged, we'll wait for consensus and motion before we get further, and then we'll ask the sheriff. Anyone from the public here to speak on this matter?
Yes, sir. We have one speaker, Morgan Voke.
Okay. Spell the last name.
V-O-K-E.
Okay. Mr. Voke,
Morning.
welcome.
I'm Morgan Voke, 1280 Main Street in Altamont. So I am the guy that brought a lot of these problems to light. We got a lot of shady business going on, a lot of things that need fixed. So things start out pretty decently and smooth through the sheriff's office. It gets over to the county and then kind of goes all over the place. So there's lots of fines, lots of liens. You all took the website down, but there's, let's say, 20 pages of open liens that I'm currently 2 of them that I bought after the liens were already there. But so I brought the attention to you all a long time ago, and at least we're working on progressing. So I think a lot of the things he's recommending are good. I think there's still issues with getting it to the point of in compliance and taken care of. There's the issue where a lot of people have these liens so they feel overwhelmed and they just give up. As a result, there's plenty of places that have grass that's this tall. There's plenty of houses that are falling apart that no one cares to do anything about. And it affects, yes, them that doesn't care, but it affects the neighbor, it affects the neighborhood, it affects everybody around. I think we forget about that. I think that we forget that it's your job, staff's job, it's all of our job to make it a good community for all of us, and we're failing. So what do we do about it? You know, I talked to somebody that brought up there's very different situations. It's very not a black and white. There's that lady who can't afford her drugs, and she brought her property into compliance, but she can't wash away her lien because she doesn't have $500 to apply to you all. Which, again, like somebody else said, why do you even waste your time applying to you all? There should be a board that takes care of that. But then there's a guy who buys a golf course and lets the golf course go to crap, and it affects everybody around it. It's, again, got grass that tall. he is not the same as she. You know, it needs to be looked at it differently. There needs to be discretion of somebody. If it's a magistrate, if it's a somebody, you know, somebody needs to be able to say, no, stick it to him, help her out. We're failing there. So that didn't seem like it was any kind of part of the solution so far. Maybe they're still working on it, but we need to have something that you can get people into compliance and then fix it, take care of it, you know, go our separate ways. I've personally gone before the magistrate and the code enforcement board because I've replaced fences without permits, I've done other things. But it was always told to me that the point of a lien or the point of a fine is not for the county to make money or anything, it is to bring you into compliance. So it's hopefully forcing you, get it together, get it done, wash our hands of it. Well, we're kind of getting halfway through and then we give up. So we need your help. We need to get better.
Thank you, Mr. Vogt. Thank you very much. Commissioner Lockhart, do you have an inquiry, Mr. Vogt?
Well, Mr. Vogt and I first met over a code enforcement issue in the building department, and that was several years ago, and we've been kind of working together through some of these issues. And the lien amnesty program was something that we instituted many, many years ago. I thought the board had directed to have it come back and do another iteration of it. Something happened with that. It didn't happen. But I think there is an entirely different conversation that we need to have as a piece of this for folks who are wanting to bring properties into compliance, because that is the ultimate goal. And I also noticed that was, you know, not a part of this presentation, but it's something that we need to take up for sure.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Vogt.
I think that needs to be ultimate
Thank you,
goal,
Mr.
for
Vogt.
sure.
So we did do that prior to COVID, the amnesty program, and then we revisited a second time midway through the COVID pandemic, and telling our staff to extend it for a second round, and it was precipitated by the, I don't know, $64 million or whatever that crazy number was, the amount of liens that were outstanding when you and I arrived here as elected officials. It was one of the first work sessions that we visited. But we did ask staff to go back a second time, which we did extend that beyond the COVID pandemic timeframe, hopefully to get people to come in compliance.
I think we forgot to tell the public.
I don't know if we did or not.
I think we missed the piece where we told people that those notices were going out that second round, because if those notices had gone out and we had confirmation of those notices having been received by all of those people, and I think that's one of the pieces of this, is that we're sending out mail and it's not necessarily being received.
And Rebecca Hammock's coming.
I know, she's going to say we sent all the letters and everybody knew.
Yes, we did.
Well, I'm talking to people who have liens and they didn't get one, so, you know, somewhere in the middle is probably what actually happened. Yeah.
Or they didn't perhaps, you know, open that piece of mail, because sometimes people see it's from a government entity and they don't open it. But we sent out postcards as well, like really colorful postcards, and we had things posted on the website. Originally, the lien amnesty program was supposed to be 6 months long, and
Correct.
it ended up being a total of 3 years through the extensions, a lot because of COVID.
Correct.
And how many people availed themselves of that?
Well, I think we heard $70,000 was collected
Yes.
out
Yeah,
of
but
the
how many?
millions.
How many properties were?
I'd have to go back and check. I don't have that data on the top of my
Yeah,
head.
I think if we revisit that, we need to figure out what worked, what didn't work, and tailor it into something that gets us to the result we were looking for, and make sure that we're doing all we can to communicate.
Thank you, Ms. Hammock. Any other public input? Dominic?
No, sir.
Okay, we'll close public input. Commissioner Herr, before I go to the sheriff, you had your hand raised?
I just want to close out that amnesty conversation. I think we should build a process where we don't need it.
Correct.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure that we were all heading down the same path of, we need to improve this to the degree that it is ongoing. And we're bringing property up to code prior to a certain period where we're going to run around and fix it, so.
No, I agree, and the whole premise behind it at the time was trying to get compliance, trying to hold
Understood.
a carrot out and say, hey, we're going to wipe this clean if you'll get your stuff cleaned up. And as we just heard, although best intentions, it didn't create a lot of fruit
Well, it was a Band-Aid
in the
on a
grand
bigger
scheme
problem,
of
right?
things, you know, so. And ironically, what's happened, many of you probably had the same calls I've had at my office. Now that that has expired, and now that somebody is trying to sell their property, they now want to take advantage of the amnesty program that has since expired. So, you know, I agree, it's right process in place, we don't need to go there. Our great sheriff is here. Sheriff Lima, do you have something to add or some things you'd like to share with us, sir?
I will. Thank you, Chairman, and good morning, everyone. And first and foremost, I want to really thank our code enforcement officers. I mean, for 20 years, they have worked hard. I am incredibly proud of them. They're probably watching this back. We'll watch it back and wonder what's going on. And I have a little bit of history here, too, because I was one of the supervisors that took on the transition of code enforcement back 20 years ago when we made that change. And the philosophy of code enforcement remains true in policing as it does back then, that the theory of broken windows, that incivility in a particular community that goes unaddressed and untouched has the ability to court in larger criminal acts because it gives the impression that nobody really cares. And I mean, that's incredibly important, but I believe the collaboration between the county staff, and the sheriff's office has grown tremendously over the years. We simply work well together. And I think that over the past 20 years, although we've had good intentions, this process could have been much smoother. Code enforcement officers deserve a dedicated leadership team that is not transitioning in and out on their way to higher ranking positions and promotions to advocate for their interests. They deserve an opportunity to come together and look at commonalities like aligning with the districts that you represent. All of you over the years have become somewhat experts in code enforcement because of the amount of complaints that your staff and you have personally been involved with. But candidly, any process that involves a county commissioner, a county manager, deputy county manager, a sheriff, and an undersheriff to get resolution on a particular issue is a bad process. So I think that Mike has done a tremendous job with his expertise, his recommendations, his feedback. I do think it's probably in the best interest of our collective citizens to centralize that back under one umbrella with the county. What that would look like on our end, candidly, and you know, Darren and I have spoken about this, is to give those code enforcement officers an opportunity to see if they wanted to be a part of that transition. Of course, I would encourage that. I would ask them to do that. But if they wanted to look for vacancies that are currently in the sheriff's office, we would entertain that as well. So many of them have been here for their entire careers. And I don't know that that's a bad thing for the county either, because I think that sometimes starting with a new set of protocol and new standard is a little bit easier sometimes than correcting habits that have been picked up. And you know, over the years, I probably should have done a better job with advocating for more staff within that duties and responsibilities. But candidly, when people pick up the phone and call, they don't normally call the sheriff's office thinking that we're the organization that is responsible for code violations. Although we've done it for many years, I think that as leaders of the county and a governing body, they pick up the phone and call you because they assume that it's going to be you and your responsibility for code enforcement. So in the end, you have full support and cooperation from us at the office. We've got a tremendous relationship. I know that the services that we provide to our community will not change. Members of our organization, deputy sheriffs, will still be made available for co-response. So if it's a county code enforcement officer and there's some unfamiliarity with the area or uncomfortableness, we will respond with, because I think it's good to work together in harmony.
Thank you very much for your willingness, Sheriff. Thank you very much. Okay. Back to the board. Any further comments from the board? Commissioner Constantine?
Thank you, Commissioner. Just the sense of frustration that we've all felt over the last number of years, because it has gotten more and more prominent of, citizens calling us, begging us. Many of them are saying, will you please file it for us? And that is a very frustrating feeling to do that, having to tell them no. Or in my case, I told a number of them no. It's just not something I'm going to do, because it's he said, she said, whatever the case may be.
I drive by.
Yeah.
And I go, yeah, it's bad, and then I file it.
Yeah, and I have done that too, but there were some that I've driven by, and it could have been he said, she said also. I like the idea of those situations that need immediate attention, instead of having to go through the whole process. And all I'm going to ask the staff to do, because I know this is now going to go into your hands, thank you very much for everything that you've done. It's really been a pleasure working with you, and for your thoroughness. And I want to thank the Sheriff's Office for working so cooperatively with them. I'm just saying, please put this, I know there's a lot of things on your plate. This is something, because we all deal with it. Mostly our staff deals with it, and our aides deal with it. And I would just say this would go a long way to making a lot of people in our county comfortable if we could find a streamline and knowing a person to get to. So thank you very much to everybody, and I'm in support of the recommendations. I'm not going to make a motion right now. I see another hand, but I am in support of the recommendations.
Which recommendation? You got three options.
Yeah, you got choices.
Well, okay, then the option that is going to, the most, I would not call it
I think it's
radical,
option
but the change.
three.
The change option, yeah, that's what I'm saying. And
Okay, got it.
the reorganization of this entire process.
Got it. Commissioner Lockhart, we'll just come right down the dais.
All right, so with the consent and collaboration and blessing of the sheriff, I will support number 3. I do want to say that I concur with eliminating the lien hearing as a separate process. I think that's imperative. Also, getting rid of the penalty recommendations as suggested. The immediate abatement for the health and sanitation issues, we got to figure out how we're going to do that. When we talked about the special magistrate being appointed by the board annually. I know I made notes on each of these little pages.
Just change the whole thing.
No, it's all,
No,
I'm
I'm
concurring with, so that staff
Yeah,
knows
yeah.
I'm audibly, publicly concurring with the different touch points. Agree with adopting the International Property Maintenance Code. The Chapter 95, that was the abatement issues, I believe, the nuisance issues. I don't know how we change was that 95, Mike?
95. Yes, 95, and the LDC, and 53.
Yeah, however we change our posture with those items, and I will continue, honestly, to look to Mike for his guidance on how we would go about doing that. All of the recommendations that you have on the first recommendation slide, the recommendations on the second recommendation slide, option 3. And I do think, although being in an amnesty program position is not the place we want to live, I think it may need to be instituted in some fashion differently than we did before, as we start to implement this new process and these new procedures, because we will have hopefully a lot of community conversation and a lot of opportunity to be out in the community at meetings talking. I imagine, hopefully I see Irvin Simpson here from the East Altamont area. There'll be opportunities to be out with the community talking about these changes, and that it is for the benefit of the entire community and how we can help people get into compliance. And I'm assuming that amnesty program will be a part of that or something like it. So those are my comments.
Mr. Delory?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Again, Mike, I think you did a phenomenal job. Thank you, Sheriff, for all your hard work, as well as your staff. I'm not going to repeat everything. I think we need to implement all of Mike's suggestions and centralize everything as we talked about in item number 3. But more importantly, I'd like to have a timeline so we can actually understand how this is going to be implemented and bring the public involved, and also understand the true cost of what this is all going to cost. Because listening to this presentation, we need to, whoever comes over, we definitely need to have more code enforcement officers. And whatever we do needs to be done great. I'd like to have Mike still a part of it, because I think he did such a great job in bringing it so quickly to the board, because this is something that you specialize in. I know that we're in a work session, so I don't know if we can make a motion, but I definitely think there's consensus to move forward with all these items that we talked about.
Commissioner Herr.
I started the parade with item number 3. I did already speak to the sheriff's office with regard to understanding the position before making that decision. I do think we need Mike to bring this through to execution. Otherwise, it's just too much for us to do, and we probably build something that isn't as efficient as you would build. And then but the one thing that got said that I'm not there yet, I don't know the answer based on the lack of data. I don't know that we need more staff. I don't. Based on the numbers I saw, I don't think we do, but I also don't know that those numbers have captured everything. So I think that is yet to be determined. I think we need an organizational structure before we decide on head count.
Mr. Chairman, something spurred my mind on both the last 2 comments, and that is, I think the staff has to take a really close look at the staff, because it sounds to me also like it did to Commissioner Herr that 22 people, or how many people, if they were organized in a different fashion, we might be able, there might be economy of scale. That's all I'm going to say. And so that's got to be something.
Mr. Chairman, I'm not saying we need to just hire people for hiring people. So we need to look at this holistically to understand what that workload is.
And you want to start down here and go up this way again?
No, I think Mr. Gray needs to weigh in.
Okay, and then the chair has a few things to say as a commissioner. Go ahead, sir.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners. And when you all had put this on my plate about 6 months ago to look at the process, I knew the person that we needed to look at it was Mr. Mike Rhodes, who has, as you all have, he's demonstrated, you all have seen his extensive experience in code enforcement. So one good news, I did talk to him before, he is willing to stay on with us to help us through whatever the transition, the implementation, get some feedback from you. So. And it is not 22 positions, because there's hodgepodge of positions in there, so it's just 22 people, but a few of them could just be doing a few things. So what, if, of course, up to the chairman and the board, that this was step 1. Step 2 is if you bring up, let me bring back to you an implementation transition, work with the sheriff. I want to thank the sheriff, too, and his staff. They've been extremely helpful in this process. When I came here, I just saw a bunch of hodgepodge of, it happening everywhere. So I appreciate you all allowing me to bring in someone like Mike to actually look at it and spend some time to dedicate time to look at it and look at what are the best practices and recommendations to this board. So on your direction, I'll just follow your lead.
So I'll try to close this out. I won't go into all the details in the briefing. I shared with you all of my comments. I don't need to regurgitate those here for the public. It's pretty much in line with what everything's been said here today. My biggest thing is I need a cost analysis. I mean, at the end of the day, that's what I need to have, a clear understanding of the cost analysis. When I arrived here 6 years ago, I didn't need to hire or tell anybody to tell me that it was broke. System's broke. People are not being treated equally under the law through the jurisdictions of this county, and that's unfortunate, and that's nobody's specific fault. It's just a matter of the fruit that is being grown based on the current program that exists. And so I will support number 3. I would support moving forward sooner rather than later, but I do need a cost analysis. And I think this board needs a cost analysis of what this looks like if we relieve the sheriff of this duty, and he may say burden, and we assume that and what that really looks like. But at the end of the day, I really believe that the efficiencies that will come to be born under the new program will likely be more cost effective than what we're currently doing. with staff time and so forth. So with that said, I think you have consensus and direction. Mr. Rhodes, do you feel that the board has given enough direction?
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Okay, thank you all very much. Thank you, Mr. Rhodes, we sincerely appreciate it. Okay, anything else for the good of the order before we adjourn for lunch break? Seeing none, we will reconvene at 1:30. Thank you all very much.